If you ever wanted to deploy your app, you would have come across Heroku. Heroku is a platform as a service that allows you to deploy your app without having to worry about any servers, management, databases, anything. So all you do is you write the code and Heroku will deploy it for you. But once you want more than the free tier, then this is actually very expensive. So I'm going to open up the pricing calculator. uh, so click this and you can see that the free version has 512 megabytes of RAM, but it also has this thing called sleeping, which means that after 30 minutes of nobody visiting your app, Heroku will automatically make this dyno sleep. So dyno is a place where your app is hosted, and basically if anyone else visits your app once your dyno is sleeping, then they will have to wait a good 20-30 seconds for the app to start up. So this is very bad if you are using or if you are hosting an API, because then the people who use your API will experience slow times and then they'll move on to other APIs. If you are using the API yourself, then you will also find slow results. So that's why they also have the hobby plan, which disables this sleeping thing, and that is $7 a month. But if you want more resources, like for example if you want 1 gigabyte of RAM, that will cost you $50 a month, and that is very expensive for a small project. So let's look at something called DigitalOcean, or something like DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean is a service, or they provide you with Linux VPSs. So they provide you with Linux servers where you can host your app yourself. Unlike Heroku, DigitalOcean doesn't do anything apart from giving you the server. So they don't set up the hosting for you. They don't set up databases. They don't manage your databases. So if your database dies, then they don't do anything, because all of that you have to do yourself. But they are very cheap. So 5 gigabytes for one $5 a month for 1 gigabyte of RAM. It's 10 times cheaper than Heroku. So you can see that this is already cheaper, but it is harder to use. So today I'm going to show you how you can deploy your apps to DigitalOcean or any other cloud provider. DigitalOcean does not sponsor this video. I'm just using DigitalOcean because I have some free credit left. And we're going to be using something called NGINX to create a reverse proxy server that basically maps the ports, and then it tells where to look for our app. And we'll also be using Docker to host our, or we'll be using Docker to run our app, and you will need to know Docker for this. So if you don't know Docker, I'll leave a link to a course or a crash course by Travis Media, which is very small, and it is very easy, and that is more than enough for to get started. We'll be using Docker and Docker Compose to create our app. So first, let's actually create a DigitalOcean server. Alright, so I am in my DigitalOcean console, and I'm in the droplet section, which is basically the VPS. VPS stands for Virtual Private Server, by the way, and it is just a Linux server. So click on Create Droplet, and this should open up the droplet creation screen. And some VPS providers actually have something called one-click apps. Basically, if you choose this, then it'll automatically install stuff like Docker for you. But not every VPS has this, so I'm not going to go with this. I'm just going to go with the base Ubuntu server. So I'm going to go with Ubuntu LTS, which is the latest LTS edition of 2021, and I'm going to go with the LTS version because I do not want stuff to break, and I recommend to do that. You can also go with 18.04 if you want. And here I'm going to choose the $5 a month plan, because that's the main reason I'm using this. It's because it's cheaper. And let's go down to the data center region. I'll choose Bangalore because that's the closest to me. I'll choose password for authentication. Now some VPS providers don't allow this or don't have this option, so I'm just going to create a root password, and we'll add our own SSH key later on. So for the password, I like to do first, let's actually set a host name. I'll be calling this test.arnufinfi.gq, because that is where our website will sit at. And now I like to type the password as root1 at, and then this host name, so I can easily remember this, and it also fulfills these requirements. Now don't worry, I'm showing you my root password because we are not going to be using, or we cannot use the root password to log in once we set up our SSH. And also I'm going to delete this droplet after this video is done, so you don't have to worry about that. But you shouldn't share your passwords with anybody. because if anybody gets into your system as root, they can just destroy everything and your entire deployment is gone. Okay, so while that is doing that is doing what it does, I'm going to head over to my free norm, which is basically a service that gives you free domain names. And I have a couple of domain names, but I'm just going to edit the arnofy.gq domain name. Okay, now I'm in my domain console. Now click on manage free norm DNS, and here I'm going to add a brand new record. Actually, I already have a test record, so I'm just going to delete that. And I'm going to add a brand new record called test, and this is actually a machine that I was using earlier. But anyway, I'm going to add a new record called test. So this will be test.unify.gq. Make the record type A, and then for the target, you can put your IP. So to get the IP, it will be different for every VPS provider. But in DigitalOcean, they just show your IP up front, and if you click on the IP, then you can copy it. So now I'll paste the IP, click Save Changes, and actually one more thing I forgot to do is I want to change the TTL, or the time to live, to 300, which means 5 minutes. So 300 seconds, 5 minutes, and after 5 minutes our domain name will automatically sync up with this IP. So now let's actually SSH into our machine. So I'm going to SSH by typing SSH root @IP. Now, if you don't have SSH, if you're on Windows, basically Windows doesn't have SSH, then you can use an external SSH client like Putty, or you can download Ubuntu for Windows using WSL. So just check WSL out; it's really good, and your steps will be different. By the way, like copying the SSH ID and all will be different. So I can't help you with that one. You will have to search for that yourself. But anyway, if it asks you if you're sure you want to connect, just type yes, and now type in your root password, which was root1 at test.unify.gq for me, and you can see we have root at test. So this is successfully working. I'm going to clear my screen by pressing Ctrl L, and I'll run apt update. So this is the command you have to run whenever you create a new distro or you create a new VPS, because it'll just sync up everything with the servers, and this will just help you install packages better. Alright, so once that's done, let's run sudo, or we don't need sudo because we're in the root account. I'm going to say apt upgrade, and what this will do is it will upgrade all of the software to the latest version. Alright, now with the upgrades done, let's actually install Docker. So head over to this documentation page that I have linked in the description and copy paste these commands. First, we will need to install all of the dependencies required to add the Docker key. Once that's done, we need to actually add the Docker key. So we need to copy this command and paste it over here, and you should get an OK at the end. Next, we can actually add the repository for Docker. So this will now add the Docker file or the Docker package to our apt, but it is recommended to first update so that we get the latest version of all of the releases. It is already done here, but just for double, it's better to be safe than sorry. And now we can hit apt install docker ce, CLI, and container rdio or container dio. Alright, so it looks like Docker has installed. Now we can verify that by typing docker-v, and it should get the Docker version, which at the time of writing is 20.10.2. And next we can install something called Docker Compose. Docker Compose basically allows us to combine one or more Docker containers together. So to install it, you can just type, we can just get the Docker Compose executable from GitHub and then put it in our user local bin, so we can execute it from anywhere. But you can't execute it just yet because Docker Compose is not yet executable, or it doesn't have the permissions to execute. So we can do that by typing, or we can give it the permissions by typing chmod or chmod +x user local bin Docker Compose. Now we can say Docker Compose -v, and we should get the latest version, which at the time of writing is 1.27.4. Now both Docker and Docker Compose are installed. The only thing we need to install is now NGINX. So to install NGINX, you can go over to the documentation page for install, and you can see that if you are on Linux, then which we are, of course, we are on Ubuntu, then the latest version of Linux will be available in your repository. So you can just type apt install NGINX. Alright, looks like NGINX is installed. Now we can verify this by going to the Docker, or sorry, the server IP, which it's not in my clipboard anymore, but I can copy it from here, paste it here, and you can see we have welcome to NGINX, which means that NGINX has successfully been installed. Now, before we do anything, before we upload our app or before we deploy our app, we have to take into precaution some security measures. So you can see that we are logged into the root account, which basically means we can do anything we want without having to ask anybody, without having to type any password. For example, if I wanted to remove everything in this container or in this VPS, I can just do this command, nobody will stop me. Now you should not execute this command, this is very dumb, but anybody, so anybody with malicious intentions can do this and your entire server is gone. So uh, in order to prevent such a thing, first of all, let's disable root login and let's disable logging in with a password. Now you may ask, if we disable root login, how can we log in, because there is no other user? Let's add a user by typing add user and then the username. So I'm going to add a user called arno5n5. I'll give it the password and then I'll retype this password, and for all of these we don't need to provide anything, so just hit enter and enter. So by the way, enter will accept the default value, which is usually the value that is capitalized and in the bracket. So we have added a user, and now this user cannot actually run the sudo command. The sudo command is required to run something with administrative privileges, and this sudo command actually requires a password. So that is more secure than using root. So let's allow our arno5n5 user to run the sudo command by typing usermod -a capital G sudo arno5n5, just like that. And now our arno5n5 user has the sudo command privileges. So that's one thing tackled. Now the second thing is, if we cannot log in with a password, how will we log in? We are going to be using something called SSH keys, which basically identify your computer in SSH, and if you have the correct SSH key, you can actually log into the computer without needing a password. So this is both secure and convenient, because you don't need to memorize a password, and also only your computer can log in. So first of all, let's actually change into this arno5n5 user. Now you can see we are at the root user, and to do that we can say switch user or su arno5n5, and we are in the arno5n5 user. So let's try executing the sudo command just to check if everything works. So I'll say sudo and then echo is just to print to the console, and I can say hello world. Type in your password, and you can see hello world is on the console or on the screen, which basically means that our sudo command has successfully or we can use the sudo command. Alright, now let's exit out of this, and I'll exit out of this SSH as well. And now if your domain name which you've added over here has synced up successfully, which it should have by now, you can just say SSH arno5n5, which is a user, at the rate the domain name, which is test.arno5n5.gq, not fq but gq. And now you can see that if I type yes and if I enter my password, I am successfully logged into our computer. So it says system restart required, so let's quickly restart our computer. Okay, so the machine has turned on. I can SSH into it by typing this command. Oh, it looks like it hasn't fully turned on, so we'll give it a bit. Okay, so the computer is fully turned on. I can type in my password and I can SSH into it. You can see that the restart warning has gone. So let's work on our SSH configuration. You can see that I can still log in as root and I can still enter my password. So we can work on our SSH configuration by typing SSH, or not SSH, sorry, by typing nano, which is a text editor. Now you can type nano dash dash version to check if nano is installed. If it isn't, then you can just say sudo apt install nano and then type in your password and install nano, but mine is already installed, so I don't have to install it again. Type in nano, or we need a sudo because we are editing a file that we cannot edit default, so we have to give the permissions. Now we want to edit the file that is located in the etc directory, and this will be in the ssh directory inside etc, and this file will be called sshd underscore config. Now hit enter to open up the ssh configuration, and we want to find the value called port. Now this will make the SSH port different. So by default it is 22, and if an attacker wants to SSH into your machine, he will of course check the default port. But if he changes this port, then he will have to do a hit and trial on every single port. So that will take him more time, and I'm just going to change this to 3333, which is the port that I prefer, but you can change it to whatever you want. Now, it's recommended to not use the same port as me because maybe some attackers will be watching this video and then they'll try the port 3333, and then they'll be able to SSH into your machine, so just change it to something else. Now, let's go down or scroll down until you find permit root login. Let's change this from yes to no. And by the way, if these options do not exist, then you can just type it over here. And if there is a hash symbol in front of this, that means this is a comment, which means you know what comments are. You're a programmer. All right. Let's go down and until we find a password authentication right here, and change this to no. And that is basically it for our configuration. Type Ctrl X, Y, enter. And also one more thing, sorry, I didn't mean to install Nano, but let's go down. In SSH by default pub key authentication is allowed, but if it says pub key authentication no, then just make that yes, otherwise you will not be able to log into your machine at all. Okay, let's close this editor by pressing Ctrl X, and if I forgot to show you how you can close it and save, you can just press Ctrl X, hit Y and hit enter, and this will change our SSH config. So now let's actually exit out of this and we'll check if our config has worked, but you can see it hasn't worked because we're still able to log in with our password. Now you may ask why. That is because we have to actually SSH, or we have to restart the SSH service. But before doing that, let's actually add the SSH key, otherwise we will not be able to log into our computer. So I'm going to create a new tab using Command T. If your terminal doesn't have a tab based, if it doesn't have tab support, then you can just create a new terminal window, and then I'm going to type this command ssh-keygen. This will create a brand new SSH key, and it'll ask you which file to save the key in. I'm fine with this. There's already a file here, but I'm just going to overwrite it, and it'll ask you for a password. Now if you want to, you can give this password, just in case, for more security. Along with the key you can also give the password, but I don't want to, so I'll just press enter again, and you can see our key is generated. So you don't have to worry about any of this because SSH will automatically add this key to our DigitalOcean Droplet when you want it to. So I'm just going to say SSH copy ID, which will copy the key from our server, or from our computer to the server. And then I'm going to say -i, which will basically allow me to give the SSH key location. And I'm just going to copy this and paste it here. And then I'll say undefined at test.undefined.gq, basically the same thing we entered for SSH. And by the way, this is actually your private SSH key. You should not show this to anybody else, because if you do, then they will be able to log into your computer. And the public key is, you can just show it to everybody else, because if they put this public key in their machine, then you can log into their computer. So just hit enter to copy the key, and now it'll ask you for the password of the SSH machine, so just enter that password, and now it'll add the key successfully. So we can test that by typing ssh undefined at test.undefined.gq, and you can see we have logged in. We didn't need to enter a password. Okay, so now that our SSH key successfully works, I'm going to close this tab, and we can reset or restart the SSH server. So type sudo service ssh restart. Just type in your password and type exit to exit out of SSH. And now let's try SSHing back in, and you can see that we have gotten a connection refused error on port 22. This is because we have changed our port to 3333. So we can specify the new port by giving the -p option, and we'll set it to 3333. And you can see that there is a big error. And to fix this error, all you have to do is you can see users undefined.sh node hosts. Just copy this and type ssh space, hit enter, or copy the or paste this, and sorry, not ssh, nano again. And if you don't have nano on your machine, then you can just use your default text editor, which is VS Code. I'm just going to exit out of this. but we need to find the line that is doing the problem, which is line number 3. And instead of using nano, I actually like to use something called vim allows me to edit my text file by using some keyboard shortcuts. So I'll guide you how to use this, but you just need to remember this number. So this is 3. Hit enter and then type colon 3 and then hit enter. You will be put on the third line. This is the third line. Now hit D twice, so press D and then press D again, and this is delete the third line. And all you have to do is you have to type colon WQ and you will exit Vim. Now if this feels a little bit too complicated for you, you can always just go into nano, go to the third line and just delete it manually, but Vim makes it faster for us. Okay, so now that our SSH key or our SSH entry is deleted, you can just hit enter, and now we will be logged into our server. So finally, we have one last thing to do in the security aspect, which is install a firewall. Now you can see that port 3333 is allowed by default, which it shouldn't be, and on DigitalOcean all ports are allowed by default. This is actually very bad because we don't want the attacker to access certain ports on our machine. So to fix this, let's install something called UFW, which stands for Uncomplicated Firewall. So just type apt install UFW, and oh, we need to type sudo because I'm not root. And for me UFW is already installed, but for you it may not be, so just install it. And now you can type UFW status to just check if it is installed. Oh, we need to be sudo, and you can see that the status is inactive. So to enable it, you can just type sudo UFW enable, and this will enable the UFW, and it will say that connection may disrupt existing SSH connections. So to fix this, or to maybe this is a very low chance that it will disrupt it, but if it does, then you will not be able to log back into your SSH. So just close this, or press Ctrl C to close it, and type sudo UFW, not UFW, allow 3333, which is our port. So the rules have been updated, and if you go to our status, you can see that the status is still inactive because we haven't enabled it. So let's enable it and hit yes, and you can see that the firewall is active, but our SSH did not get disrupted, so that is nice. If it does get disrupted, you can just log back in again. And by the way, just replace 3333 with your SSH port. And now if you type sudo UFW status, you can see that 3333 is allowed. So now we have to also enable the NGINX ports. You can see that if I refresh this, it no longer works because our NGINX ports aren't enabled on the firewall. So to enable that, we can type sudo UFW allow, then open quotes, because this is two words, NGINX space full, and then allow that. And then if we refresh the page, you can see NGINX works. And one last thing I want to try out is I want to try if we can visit our domain, and we can visit a domain. So if we visit test.undefinedfile.gq, you can see we have welcome to NGINX. Alright, so NGINX is installed, firewall is installed, security has been, we have good security, Docker is installed. Now the only thing that is left is to actually deploy our app. So we need an app first of all. So I have this app which I have just made for this video itself. I'm going to be using Docker to deploy this app because that's the title of this video. And if I just show you this app, the server is running, you can see right over here. If I visit localhost 5000 on my machine, right here, you can see it says this page has one view. Then we can give a username like hello, hit enter. You can see user created with username hello. So this is basically storing it in MongoDB. Go back to the home page, you can see this page has two views, and this is using Redis to do that. So I just wanted to show you how you can add more services like Redis and MongoDB. Then we also have the user just right over here. So we can give the username, and this will be actually blank for now. We can also give another username, so again will be blank. We can say hello, we can create another user, go back to the home page. So this is basically our application. So we're going to host this on NGINX, and we're going to be using Docker to manage the dependencies like Redis and MongoDB. So I'm going to quickly stop this for now, and there are actually two ways you can put this image, or you can put this everything here on your machine, on your remote server, and that is using Git and using the Docker Hub. So using Docker Hub is actually recommended if you only have the Docker file, but since we also have Docker Compose, I'm just going to be using Git to commit it to our GitHub, and then whenever we are done, we can just SSH down, or we can pull that from our GitHub, and then we can build it and deploy it. So let's do that. I'm going to create a Git repository by typing git init, and I have a git ignore already, but if you don't, just put notepad in there, that's it. Okay, so now I'll type git add dot git commit dash m init for the first commit, of course, why not, and I'll say git first we need to have a GitHub repository, so I'll just say github.com/new, and here I'll be able to create a new repository. I'll call this NGINX deploy example and create repository. So this will create a new repository, and here I'm just going to grab the URL, so I'll copy that, and I'll say git remote add origin. So this is what most people name their GitHub origins or GitHub remote, and now I can just say git push origin master. So this will push over all of my code to GitHub, and you can see that if I refresh this page, all of our code is over here. Now make sure that this is a public repository, otherwise you will not be able to pull down your code unless you log in, of course. But you can log in, you can set up an SSH key on this machine, you can do all of that if you want. Alright, so first of all we need to have git installed. So I think it is already installed on my machine, but if it isn't, then you can type apt or sudo apt install git, of course. And once git is installed, you can just say git clone, not client but clone, https github.com -5 and what is this again, nginx deploy example .git. This should just clone it from GitHub. We can cd into nginx deploy example, and we can find all of our stuff here. So now we can just say docker compose up -d. So what this will do is it will just oh, we have permission denied. So first of all, let me explain this command. This will basically run this docker compose in detached mode. Detached mode, basically it will not show us any logs, and you can see that we have an error, permission error by the way, and this is because by default on Linux, Docker doesn't allow you to execute commands using sudo. So this can get a bit annoying because we have to type our password every time. So I'm just going to use the same thing we did to allow us to use the sudo command, and that will be just to use usermod and give us the docker group, and this will allow us to run all docker commands without needing sudo, and type in a username just like that. And now I can just say docker compose up -d. Oh, we have permission hidden again, and you might be wondering why is this happening. This is because we just have to exit out of SSH because we just need to relog in, and because this is because Linux doesn't really know that we have gotten these permissions, so we just, if we relog in, then it will get to know. Okay, now let's run docker compose up -d, and it is successfully running. So it is going to build our docker, or it's going to build everything. So I'll be right back once this is done. Looks like docker compose is done initializing all of our containers, and if we go over to test.undefined.gq, this is actually going to be hosted on port 5000. You can see that we get our app. So this page has one views. If I enter my username, hello, for example, and the user is added, this page has two views and we get the user. And if I say test again, add user, go back, we get test again. And this is successfully working, but you can see that this is actually running on port 5000. And if you visit, for example, some website like duckduckgo.com, which is my search engine, then you will notice that we don't have to provide port 5000 here. This is just on port 80 by default, which is the default port. You can see if I type port 80, that just get removed automatically by Brave browser. And basically this is our this is what we're going to be using. This is what we're going to be using NGINX for. So we're going to be creating a proxy pass from port 80 all the way to port 5000, And basically what this will do is if we visit port 80, it will appear as if we visited port 5000. So instead of this ugly website, we will get our amazing app. So to do that, first of all, we have to disable this website, which is already here. So I'm going to cd into /etc/nginx, which is where the nginx configuration is stored. Clear my screen, Control L, and you can see that we have two folders, that we're going to be paying attention to, which is sites enabled and sites available. So let's look at, or let's ls inside sites enabled. And you can see that we have this default over here, and this we can actually remove by typing unlink, or if you type sudo unlink sites enabled /default, type in your password, and now if I ls into that again, you can see we have nothing here. If we refresh our page, you can see that we still have this here. Why is this happening? It's because we have to restart NGINX. So I can just say sudo NGINX restart, and I think this is okay. I can just use systemctl. So I can say systemctl restart NGINX, and if I refresh this, you can see this site cannot be reached because we just removed the default site. So let's create a new site inside sites enabled. So I'll just cd into that, sites available, not sites enabled, and you can see that we have this default back over here. So basically what we do is we get this default and we actually link it inside sites enabled. So first let's create a brand new site. So I'm going to say, I'll call this test dot, I'll just call the site test. Now inside this, first of all, we need to give a server block. So just like that, and inside this we need to say listen, and we will specify the port. It should be 80, and remember, after every statement we have to provide a semicolon, just like Java for example, or C sharp. And then we can say location slash, so all locations basically, that means. And here we'll say proxy pass, which basically I told you, this will just redirect everything from port 80 to localhost 5000, just like that. And then we can also say proxy set header, so we can just set the host header to the host, actual host, so we don't lose any host headers. Now let's type Ctrl X Y enter. Oh, permission denied. This is because I didn't put sudo, so I'm just going to quickly copy everything inside this because we will not have our changes anywhere. And you can just type Ctrl X N to exit out of nano without saving anything, and we can put a sudo in front, and we can Control V or Command V in Mac to paste it. Press Ctrl X, hit Y, hit enter to save it, and you can see we have two files here. And instead of using ln, I'm just going to do cp to copy it over. So I'll say sudo copy test and sites enabled test, and we can list or whatever's inside sites enabled, and we have this test file, which will exactly match the one that we just edited. So I can restart NGINX by using sudo systemctl restart NGINX, and you can see that this has actually failed, and this fails because of the configuration being invalid. So let's quickly look at why this is invalid. Alright, so this is failing because first of all, we do not have any semicolons, which is required. So let's just copy, or let's just save that, and then we have to again copy this again. If we restart NGINX, oh, we have another failure, and you can see invalid URL prefix in etc/nginx sites enabled, and this is happening because I actually forgot to put not cat nano. I actually forgot to put HTTP in this. So here where it says localhost 5000, I have to actually put an HTTP :/ and Ctrl X Y enter, and this should hopefully work. So let's first copy this, and now we will restart NGINX, not status, restart. Some ctl restart, and by the way, you can quit this by pressing a Q. Alright, so now NGINX has restarted successfully without having any errors, and if we visit test.firefighter.gq, you can see that our app has successfully been deployed. So this page has 4 views, we can give a username, username has created, and you can see we have whatever user we have, and if I refresh this page, you can see that this data is going nowhere. So that is amazing. and our app has successfully been deployed. This is running on your own machine that you have deployed on, so you can give yourself a nice pat on the back. And that is it for this video. So thank you all for watching. If you have any doubts, queries, suggestions, anything, just leave them down in the comments below. And if you didn't understand this, then you can check out the write-up on my website arnavfinfi.gq or on dev.to, which is another place where I write blogs and stuff. That'll be linked in the description. So thank you all so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.